Afternoon, I call to order the Lynchburg Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, December 15th, 2021. And our first order of business is the approval of our November 10th, 2021 minutes. Anybody had anything they need to add or any corrections? A motion?
Move to accept the minutes as written.
Okay. Second. All opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. All right, that's next thing here. We have new business where we will be hearing consideration of adopting the Tyriana and Pleasant Valley Neighborhood Plan as part of the city's comprehensive plan for 2013 through 2030. The proposed neighborhood plan proposes connectivity improvements, new recreation facilities, including a greenway trail system and park at the former Concord Turnpike landfill, recommendations for the preservation of historic resources in the neighborhood, a compact neighborhood design concept, and gateway improvements at the entry to this neighborhood/city. As part of the plan, the future land use map is recommended for amendment at the Concord Turnpike Convenience Center from public park to public use for property at 2340 Concord Turnpike from employment to public use, for property at 5031 Tyriana Road from low-density residential to public park, for property at 5106 and 5110 Tyriana Road from public park to medium-density residential, for property at 2600 Concord Turnpike partial and 2704 Concord Turnpike from public use to neighborhood commercial, for property at 2600 Concord Turnpike also partial from public use to mixed use, for property at 200 Nickerson Road partial from low-density residential to employment, for properties at 5118, 5122, 5124, 5128, 5132, 5136, and 5206 Pleasant Valley Road from resource conservation to neighborhood commercial, 5205 Pleasant Valley Road from community commercial to neighborhood commercial. Properties at 208, 214, 222, 244 Poston Street and 212, 218, 304, 310 Holcomb Path Road from low density residential and medium density residential to mixed use. Who would be doing this? Rachel? Great, thanks.
I'm excited to be able to talk with you about this plan today. It's been a long time coming. First, let's just start with a little bit of background on the project itself, in terms of why we were even doing this plan in the first place, the planning process that got us up to this point, and what we gathered during the input phase. What are you saying? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So the city's comprehensive plan, of course, is our guiding document for the future of Lynchburg as a whole. In the plan, we set a lot of goals and recommendations for achieving the vision of making Lynchburg a great place to live, work, and play. And in addition to the comp plan, we also have these smaller area plans, such as this one we're talking about today. The one that's in front of you is hitting on the following specific goals set out in the comp plan of building strong neighborhoods, conserving our unique places and resources, promoting business vitality, enhancing attractiveness of gateways and travel corridors, as well as protecting the natural environment through sensitive development and redevelopment. There was also the previous neighborhood plan in 2003, which was adopted as part of the comp plan. That was largely unimplemented, placed a lot of emphasis on projects like the previous need for a new landfill, which is no longer on the table, the village center concept, which was supposed to bring this neighborhood sewer, and we've tried to focus this time more on neighborhood scale quality of life improvements that would benefit the existing neighborhood, as well as strengthen it and kind of build a foundation and identity for future development to grow on. It's also a good time to be doing this plan because, we have other current planning efforts like the Parks and Rec Master Plan, as well as the Department of Water Resources looking at all unsewered areas in the city and trying to establish how to serve those neighborhoods. And just the growth in general, development in Lynchburg is expected to continue. We have downtown very close to this neighborhood. We know that continues to grow. We have a limited amount of developable land, and with Lynchburg's topography, and given that this neighborhood has a large amount of open green space, we know that continued growth must happen within our current borders. We're not growing, we're not annexing. So that includes areas like downtown, as well as our neighborhoods like Pleasant Valley and Tyriana. So this plan sets the vision for how that should happen. Because as development pressure increases, the neighborhood will see change. And a number of residents throughout this process told us that they like their neighborhood. They like the rural character, but nothing can stay the same forever. So this plan attempts to find a balance between preserving that rural character and also allowing progress in a way that meets the needs of the neighborhoods and improves quality of life. So way back in 2019, a steering committee was formed. We met to outline the larger concerns within the neighborhood, and then from that, once we kind of knew the general issues of what people might want to talk to us about, we used that input to structure a neighborhood workshop. I think a few of you attended that, and it was held at Pleasant Valley Baptist Church. They were very gracious to host us, and we got a lot of really good feedback from those conversations with neighbors. COVID slowed us down a lot. Typically with our neighborhood plans and any planning effort, really, we like to have in-person meetings. We like to have that face-to-face with the people. And that just wasn't possible for a long time. So in December 2nd, I believe, a virtual meeting was held to present the plan to the public. The key takeaways from the public input, the initial public input, was, were the history. They told us a lot about the Pleasant Valley history, the Pleasant Valley Historic Mile, the Meganson Homestead, the Tyree Plantation, the Tyriana Cemetery. In terms of land use, we heard about the need for a multi-generational community that can accommodate aging populations as well as welcome new families. And one concern is the lack of public gathering space and recreation space for neighbors to enjoy. And we found that just in trying to plan meetings. I mean, there was virtually no infrastructure, public infrastructure, like a park or even a pavilion or something when we were trying to meet outside or something like that for COVID. There was just a true lack of that kind of space in this neighborhood. Mobility was also a concern. There are really no facilities for safe walking and biking right now. The only way to travel is in a car, and so traffic speeds are also concerning to residents. If you do want to walk, it's not safe. And when it comes to maintenance, appearance, and aesthetics, a lot of neighbors are concerned that over the years some things have gotten better, such as the odor from the wastewater treatment plant, which has been somewhat mitigated due to new technologies, and then other things have gotten worse, such as overall appearance, trimming of fields, that sort of thing, overgrowth. And so these guiding principles were established based on that neighborhood feedback. Ensure it's a great place to live, enhance and preserve the neighborhood's natural resources, celebrate its history, make it a multi-generational community, and improve connections to and within Tyriana and Pleasant Valley. Which led us to our vision statement. And in summary, maintain natural beauty, rural character, and grow economically in strategic locations. The housing market should provide for families and aging adults with a focus on neighborhood and community, offer recreation opportunities, scenic views, neighborhood services, and a strong sense of community. And through these things, strengthen the neighborhood's identity while defining its place within the city as a whole. So more than a vision, the neighborhood plan is designed to be a sort of a toolkit that can guide the neighborhood towards sustainable development. The plan identifies with the principles principles identified during the planning process and defines the policies, projects, and initiatives that will help the residents meet community goals. The topics included include future land use, connectivity, neighborhood design, parks and open space, and historic resources. And so this is the sort of overall neighborhood plan and the key recommendations. 1 through 10 you can see on the side there. I know this is probably very hard to read on this screen. But the key recommendations were, create an identity from the history and assets, establish an urban design palette, find a place for some neighborhood scale commercial, establish a greenway system, repurpose brownfield sites, create an attractive outdoor destination, protect the historic sites, provide housing types for diverse demographics such as young families and aging population groups, a streetscape plan for complete streets, and establish city and neighborhood gateways. And so with that, we do have some future land use map changes proposed, and this is the long list that Tom had to read at the beginning of when he was reading from the agenda. And if you received a notice in the mail, that is what this is about. And so I don't want anyone to think that I received one phone call from a lady that was concerned we might be purchasing her property or changing the zoning or wanting to acquire it somehow. That is not the case at all. The future land use map is a guiding document that we use to base our zoning decisions on. It does not change anything about what the owners currently do with their property. And so I realize a lot of people may have gotten that letter, and I just want to address that up front. The proposed changes are highlighted in this really bright green color. And so, this map is here for our reference if we need to come back to it, but we talk about these changes in the following slides. So one thing that has remained constant from the 2003 plan is the recommendation for a park on the former Concord Turnpike landfill. Parks and open spaces are important land uses that promote physical and psychological health of citizens, strengthen our social fabric, and make neighborhoods more attractive places to live and work. And while there's a lot of undeveloped land in this neighborhood, there is not dedicated recreational space or gathering areas. Feedback revealed that many households, particularly those with young children, often travel to other areas of the city to access parks and participate in outdoor activities. So the former landfill represents a significant recreational opportunity for the neighborhood. And the concept proposed, there's a variety of uses here. It's really designed to be a green space park, a lot of passive uses. However, there's some programming to kind of, guide the activities, but really it could be used for a lot of things. And so there is a proposed connection to the park from the James River Parkway, which you may remember from the Downtown 2040 plan, which was a new connection from downtown to Tyriana. And there's also potential for entrance to the park off of Tyriana Road from a city-owned property here. There's also potential for some sort of community space on that site, in addition to not just being an entrance into the park, but perhaps a gazebo or some sort of gathering space for the community. And realizing that a landfill and a park may be something that initially doesn't seem to go together in a lot of people's minds. I have to admit, I kind of raised my eyebrows when I first read it in the 2003 plan. This is something that it's quite common. There's not a lot of alternative uses for former landfills because of their limitations. You really can't build, you can't dig too far because it is capped underneath the surface. So here's just some case studies of really interesting and successful park projects that other cities have done. The pocket neighborhood concept is something that is proposed nearby to the proposed park entrance. Tyriana and Pleasant Valley is one of the few areas with open land suitable for potential development. However, it remains undeveloped due to the current infrastructure constraints. So this is really sort of an infill project. It exists pretty much within an existing neighborhood. It's a city-owned parcel, so we do have the advantage of owning the property already. And so this plan illustrates a pocket neighborhood concept, which is just a smaller footprint housing model. And they are designed in a way to, typically you would see it oriented around a gathering space in the middle, a community garden, or, if it's for younger families, something like a playground. It's flexible, but the idea is, the smaller footprint and the infill to strengthen the existing neighborhood. Another land use proposed change for the neighborhood are the neighborhood commercial areas. Right now there's a few office, very little retail, and some industrial uses as well. People living in this neighborhood rely heavily on their vehicles to access goods and services, and it's convenient because they are located right on 460. You can get in your car and be on Wards Road in 5-10 minutes. However, a key component in vibrant communities is mixing land uses and placing residential and commercial and recreational uses in proximity where it makes sense. This encourages people to walk more, bike more, and rely less on their car, so increasing physical activity and a sense of security among residents. Placing commercial uses near residential areas can actually increase property values and foster a healthy tax base. So our future land use map change designates two community commercial areas, it should be neighborhood commercial areas, here and here. So this is Pleasant Valley Road, and I believe that's Nickerson. Sorry, it's so small I can't read. So these are strategically located at these sort of street nodes where intersections are happening. So near housing blocks, but not, in the middle of the housing, to create sort of a pedestrian-friendly environment for residents and visitors, as well as access to goods and services for the community. Standards for this type of development would encourage construction and improvements that enhance the character and appeal of the neighborhood, while being in scale that respects the character of those existing houses. We already talked a little bit about the James River Parkway, which was proposed as part of the Downtown 2040 plan. This would eliminate some at-grade railroad crossings between downtown and Tyriana, as well as give a new access into the park. There's also some alternatives for the jug handle configuration at 460 and Pleasant Valley Road, because that is something that we heard from neighbors. Although it does create a safer situation in terms of accidents, people really don't seem to enjoy using it. And so when development does happen across 460, there are a few alignments proposed in the plan to look at when we start seeing more traffic needing to access that side of 460. The Holcomb Path Road Bridge is a connector over 460. And so it's envisioned as sort of this neighborhood link because the 460 is so dividing between the north and south halves of this neighborhood. The bridge is also part of a greenway system that we're going to cover a little bit later. So it has multimodal facilities, and so just to bring those two halves of the neighborhood back together, it's an important mobility element of the plan. And so the greenway system is in, I think it's 3 phases. It's basically a dedicated pathway for pedestrians and cyclists, which we don't have right now in the neighborhood. The long-term vision is to build a continuous system that links the destinations within Tyriana and Pleasant Valley to other areas of the city. The proposed route starts at the south edge of neighborhood on Holcomb Path Road, crosses over that bridge we just talked about, and runs through the neighborhood to the east side of the river to link long-term back to the James River Heritage Trail into downtown. One section of the greenway is shown on this slide with examples of placemaking elements that can be incorporated into the trail to make it more of a play street or a linear park rather than simply a way to get from point A to point B. These elements can include things like community garden space, public art, historical, interpretive signage, fitness stations, that sort of thing. And so that brings us to historic resources, because those can be tied into that greenway as well. Initially, we went into this project calling it the Tyriana Plan, but through conversations with residents, we learned that many consider Tyriana and Pleasant Valley to be two distinct areas. So, this plan proposes, well, it's in the name, Pleasant Valley and Tyriana, to recognize the important places within each. So the Pleasant Valley Historic Mile is a grassroots effort by Mr. Joe Kennedy and I believe Lorenzo Meganson as well, who's with us in the audience, to preserve important historic sites, including the Meganson School, which was established during Reconstruction. Some of these sites do coincide with that proposed greenway route and can be incorporated with one another. We also talk a little bit about the Tyree Plantation, where Tyriana's namesake came from, as well as the church there and the historic cemetery. The Lower Basin is also slightly out of the study area, but this connection to downtown along Concord Turnpike contains prime examples of industrial architecture from the turn of the 20th century. And so these buildings are very important to Lynchburg's early economy. And so some protection or designation is recommended for the Lower Basin as well. This plan echoes and reinforces several of the strategies outlined in the Blueprint for Opportunity, which is the Office of Economic Development and Tourism's 5-year strategic plan. These include placemaking strategy, tourism experiences. We talk about that with the landfill park as well as the greenway system, improving connectivity. We just talked about a couple mobility projects such as the Holcomb Path Road Bridge and the need for multimodal transportation options when possible, and developing the real estate, land infrastructure, and incentive tools to support business expansion. So on that note, infrastructure, since the 2003 plan, utilities have really been the chicken or the egg question. Should sewer be installed to drive development or vice versa? And the important thing to recognize is, the economic and environmental impacts that will bring. We know that, again, there is pressure given that we are limited to the 50 square miles that we have. So we know attention probably will turn to this neighborhood at some point. So that's really been an ongoing conversation with our Department of Water Resources. They have acknowledged the need for sewer in this area as well as other neighborhoods, and that's why they're currently in the process of creating that master plan to figure out how and when to sewer those areas. The lack of utilities has really acted as a land bank, and so when that door for development opens, we talk about respecting and protecting the existing neighborhood. And I think that highlights the importance of several of these identity forming projects that we've talked about to guide that development. There's a couple more in the plan, like Mr. Rogers mentioned it at the beginning, the Gateway Project. That's another form of identity that I think is really important that we establish in this neighborhood so that future development doesn't conflict with that identity, what the neighborhood wants. Just to reference what we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, trying to find that balance between, preserving what people like about their neighborhood while acknowledging that, it can't stay undeveloped forever, completely. So, yeah, that's a summary of the major projects in the plan. I know there's some things that, in the interest of time, we haven't covered. If you have any questions about those, or if those come up during the public comments, I'll be happy to address those. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, I think it'd be appropriate just to open this up to public comment rather than hearing just support or not support.
Okay.
Let people come up and voice their opinion. And I'm sure there are people who have things they want to say. This is a pretty broad plan, and we spend a lot of time talking about this, and planning office has spent a lot of time working on it. So if someone wants to come forward and kind of give their comments on this, if you would, please state your name. There's a place to sign, and would like to hear public comments on this as well. And I believe that there's a notepad up there to sign your name on, or a piece of paper.
Hello, my name is Lana Musgrave. I was Lana Tester. I was born in Lynchburg and brought home to 4815 Tyriana Road. I lived there for 20 years, and then in 2012, I bought the home from my mom. So most of my life has been in this neighborhood, and I really appreciate the attention that has been given during these meetings, and I would just encourage you to continue that development for our neighborhood. We were given a lot of promises when the landfill was first established. We were in Campbell County, and they annexed us and put the landfill there, and there were a lot of promises made, and we have not seen any of those promises fulfilled. And I'm 46 years old. That's a long time to wait for some of those promises to be fulfilled. So we're really excited that there's some interest in our neighborhood, but we also appreciate them allowing us to give some feedback. And I'm thankful that we're getting some traffic again on this, because this was about a year and a half that we didn't move forward. So I'm just hoping that we can use today as some start to move forward and make some plans and kind of open things up for our community and finally come through with those promises that have been made for a long time ago.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to make a comment or be heard on this? And I'd remind you, we do have a 2-minute limit on speaking, so, oh, I'm sorry, 3-minute limit on speaking, so, oh, that's fine. Oh, you'll be fine, yeah.
Gotta hurry up because I'm working on the clock.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
I live at 218 Holcomb Path Road. Since we moved there in 1977, Holcomb Path Road doesn't seem to have been part of any neighborhood. There seems to be a desire to join it with Tyriana. The only connection we have with Tyriana is Deacon's Garage. Yes, it would be nice to be able to get downtown easily. The highway construction has more or less been jammed down our throats, waiting for years and years and years for those bridges to get done. Previous speaker, Paul, talked of promises. Well, the city, I think, annexed this part of the Campbell County in 1974, if I'm not mistaken, and we still have no mailbox, and we have no bus stop. We have no sewers on Holcomb Path Road. The city should compensate us for disposing of their sewer, because we're part of the city now. Mixed use, how do you define mixed use? What does mixed use mean? I heard the term several times, mixed use for some of the property. What does that mean? What is mixed use?
Rachel, if you want to address that. quickly?
I can't, I mean, I don't want to eat into your time, but I mean, typically we get all the feedback and then staff will
Oh,
try to
okay.
address those if that's if, I
Okay.
hear what you're asking. If you, do you
I
have?
don't want a fast food joint for some out-of-town company next door to me anymore, at all. And there's a possibility that's going to be here because the property's owned by somebody in New York.
We have that, yeah, we have that down to address.
Pocket neighborhood, okay, I saw that in the drawing. Industry. How about something that would make money for the city besides residential taxation? From my standpoint, residences don't generate that many taxes. We closed the foundry downtown, and that was a shame. It was, 2,000 jobs lost. And there's a few things that have puzzled the city, why our tax rates are lower or haven't been increased, same as everybody else. Well, when you lose 2,000 jobs in your neighborhood, oh yeah, you just lost your job, fine, we're gonna raise your taxes. That didn't work. The light at Concord Turnpike is a debacle. We waited through 3 lights until I decided to turn right, go down to Pleasant Valley Way and come back to Concord Turnpike, turn down Concord Turnpike. The timing on that light is atrocious. If there's one vehicle coming out of Concord Turnpike, all the traffic has to wait until that vehicle moves, then wait through another light on 460. And that's been the way it has been since they put that in. That's about all I have to say.
We definitely address those questions when we're all wrapped up with public comment, and you can always ask to hear more if your questions don't get answered. So I appreciate you coming up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just have a couple of comments and questions. I'm real excited about the landfill and opportunities and possibilities. I know this has been talked about for a while. But one of my questions, I'm sorry, my name's Yvette Harris, resident in Pleasant Valley. A couple of my questions based off of the letter is the rationale for why we're making some of these changes. I see for Pleasant Valley Road, we have several properties that's going from a resource conservation to neighborhood commercial. So I'm not clear what that means. I don't know what a resource conservation is. I looked up a neighborhood commercial. So my understanding is you may put some stores and everything on this area of property right there in Pleasant Valley. So you mentioned about the quality of life and the impact of the quality of life to the residents there. So I'm just kind of curious, what type of stores are you talking about putting there? Right now you have 2 homes on that area, and across the street from that area you have homes. So what type of neighborhood commercial property are you going to put there on that strip right there at Pleasant Valley? So a couple of those things have popped up in regards to looking at that letter. Also, you go for the Terriana Road, you went from low density residential to a public park, okay, but you then also went from low to a medium. So in looking that up, I see low density is single family value type homes to a medium, which now we might have duplex multi apartments or something like that. So when making those type of changes, and it says here in the letter that there's not going to be any impact to the zoning, but I'm a little concerned because how can you go from a resource conservation to now a neighborhood commercial and that not impact the zoning, as well as, more importantly, the people there that's living across the street from now a quote unquote commercial building or right next door to a commercial building. and you have 2 homes separating those areas. So, and looking at the letter, looking at what you presented here, it looks good, but when we talk about some of the areas that you're now going to put homes or you're going to put stores in the landfill area, that's great. But when you're talking about next door to someone's home or across the street from somebody's home, I don't want to live across the street from a convenience store. So that's some of the questions and concerns that I have in regards to being a resident in this community. Thank you.
Can you give your name, please?
Yvette Harris.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Ms. Harris. Anybody else want to come forward and talk, share your opinions on this? Okay, and we don't not doing anybody online, I'm sure, at this point. Okay. Yes, sir.
One more question about the bridge, Holcomb Path Road Bridge.
The whole, okay.
What is it going to look like?
We will address that. I'm gonna write that down right now.
Where is it going to be?
And I think we also have some maps that will show that. Maybe we can zoom in on them so you can see. So, great. All right, well then at this point, I'm gonna close the public hearing. And then, I'm sure we have questions. And if there is something that you hear that you want to talk about, please just let us know, and we can then ask you to come up and maybe weigh in a little bit more on what you're hearing. Sound good? All right. I guess we have a list of things to look at here.
Sure. So the first thing I heard from Ms. Musgrave was about follow-through and making sure that we follow up on these things that we're proposing. We are already looking at how to fund some of these things, assuming the plan is adopted by council in the next month or so. We're looking at our capital improvements plan. We also have a funding mechanism chart in the back that has some potential grant sources and things like that. I don't know that I can say any more than that right now, especially since the plan isn't adopted yet. But it is something that's on our radar. We certainly have some neighborhood plans that are more implemented than others. Tom and I were just talking about that today. So we are already considering, how to prioritize these things and how to move them forward once they get adopted. And then, let's see, the next concern that I heard.
I think it was mixed use.
Yeah, some of these things are about VDOT and the light timing, which unfortunately we don't have control over, but we could pass those concerns along. What is mixed use? Mixed use, as the name implies, you would normally see a mix of uses. That means residential, commercial. Typically, depending on the zoning, these things would be required of a, city council action would be required with planning commission's input as well. There's no current proposal for, to go out and build the mixed-use projects. Again, and Ms. Harris hit on it too, it doesn't impact the current zoning, but the future land use changes are something that we would look at and consult, take into consideration with the proposals as they come in. Some may be appropriate and some may not be. I don't know if that...
So that addresses the question of the zoning, because that was one of the things I think probably is troublesome to some, is they hear that this won't impact zoning, and they say, well, how will it not impact zoning if we have these kind of changes? But
right.
When we talk about the future land use, we're looking much further in the future, right?
Right. So changing the future land use map today or whenever council adopts it does not immediately change the zoning. The zoning stays the same until someone wants to rezone it. Someone petitions us to rezone it. The city typically does not go out and proactively rezone properties, especially those that it doesn't own. So that, I don't know if that answers that question.
But there definitely is a shift to emphasizing more development than what's currently in the flume, from what I can see.
Yeah, so like when she was talking about the neighborhood commercial and that sort of thing.
A lot of R1s going, or a lot of low residential going to higher residential, the loss of resource conservation. I don't think we should downplay what we're doing to the flume, because that's going to be our guide.
Right. Let me see if I can zoom in on and talk more specifically about these.
Yeah, unfortunately, the parcel viewer seems to be down right now. It's not making it easy to look these things up.
So maybe we could just go through these one by one, and that would maybe answer some questions. These properties here are currently, I believe this is industrial. This is essentially a parcel that the city uses for purposes of the wastewater treatment plant. I think they also store some gravel and things like that here. That is proposed for public use. The current convenience center at Concord Turnpike. I know it's hard without the visual of the aerial maps, so I apologize. The convenience center is currently designated as a park from the 2003 plan.
Are you moving a cursor around on that screen?
Oh,
Because we're not seeing it. I think everybody's looking to see where you're going, and it's not happening, so. There you go.
if I do this, okay.
Yeah.
Now we're doing something. Okay. Yes, so this is currently a parcel that's used by Water Resources for storage and things like that. That's going to public use. This is currently the convenience center, which is marked for public use. It was previously in the plan for park, but we don't see the need for the convenience center going away anytime soon. This is also a city-owned parcel, which is currently designated as low density. However, this is where we were talking about that potential connection and entrance into the landfill park, as well as community space. This is currently green on the map. It's proposed for medium density residential to match what's around it. And that is the location for the proposed pocket neighborhood, or the compact housing neighborhood. This is the neighborhood commercial node, as well as this one here. Again, kind of locating these at corners to make the most sense in terms of traffic. And so this is currently community commercial, which is a more intense sort of use, but Ms. Harris asked what kind of stores are we talking about when we say neighborhood commercial. On that slide, we talk a little bit about scale and uses that would meet the needs of the residents. So we'd be talking B1 or maybe B3. We wouldn't be looking for a B5 more intense type use here. And these are things that we can take into consideration. The future land use map says, neighborhood commercial for this area. However, someone's asking us to rezone it for a convenience center, and we know that's not what the plan designates as a need for the neighborhood. And so that's the kind of discretion, we have. The flume says one thing, but, we look at each petition based on, what they are proposing specifically at that time. And if it's not appropriate, just because the flume says it, you don't have to change it. That's up to the commission as well as council.
Yes, ma'am, you want to say something?
Yes, what is the resource conservation? So if you go back to your other screen,
Mm-hmm.
in which you were highlighting the Pleasant Valley, that you're now looking at neighborhood commercial.
Whoa.
Yeah, that one, you make that one bigger. and it's like a peachy color. That's the area that I'm talking about, where right now, there's homes on that Pleasant Valley Road, and on the section that you had peachy, there's 2 homes right there. So I'm just kind of curious, so I don't know what resource conservation is.
So
For us to go from that to the neighborhood commercial.
Gotcha, and I'm sorry to not look at you when I talk, but I have to face the mic. Okay, but I think I hear what you're asking now, and that is these parcels do currently have some residences on them. This is actually, I received that phone call from one of these residents concerned about, did that mean we were going to acquire it like VDOT did for 460? And the answer to that, of course, was no. And that is something I want to make clear, that just because we're changing the flume doesn't mean the city is seeking to, the city isn't going to go out and put commercial here. This means that long-term, we see neighborhood commercial as a better use for this property, given its location next to 460 and kind of at this bigger intersection in the neighborhood. And so, whether there are still homes, I mean, more than likely, if someone's looking to do a commercial development, they would buy those homes rather than just one and have the commercial next to an existing residential. Again, these are things we would look at the specific petition on its merits at the time it comes in. Right. The future land use map is I don't want to say it's a loosely guiding document, but it really is. It doesn't bind anyone to a specific use. It's just something that we can consult for future land use decisions, as the name sort of implies.
So when I look at the peachy color, and there's the one box that has a corner cut out, I think that's a trucking company. And I think what you're saying is the little box straight across from it, people aren't necessarily going to want to, even if they have a house now, there probably won't be people who want to buy it necessarily live beside a trucking company. And I think that's more of the thought is in the future, right? Is that what we're thinking? Like looking at that kind of?
Well, so yes, in part. Longer term, we do feel it would be more appropriate to have neighborhood commercial type uses on that trucking site. However, the trucking site is there now. It can continue to be there because that's how it's zoned. But longer term, the odds of it ever being anything other than commercial at this point, are slim to none. So yes, we can say it makes sense for the commercial area, for the area around it to adopt a little bit of commercial. And again, I think the proximity to 460 is also an important reason behind that.
Help you, a question?
I just wondered, why was that originally designated as, it was just designated on the flume as resource conservation? Okay, so there wasn't any specific, there wasn't any zoning that went along with that?
So it was designated as resource conservation. It sits up from 460, so lots of times in our steeper slope areas, those are sort of automatically considered resource conservation. But, as we've seen, the hotel at the mall, they built a hotel on a hillside. So, topography or not, we think that would be the ideal use.
Rachel, thank you for all the work you and other staff members have put into this, because I know this has been, as you said, a long time coming. I just wanted to point out to the record, it's not part of the plan, but there is a piece of property that the street address is 2205 Concord Turnpike. And all of that property up there at one time was owned by Charles Lynch, the father of John Lynch, the founder of the city. And at that address of 2205, there's a house up there. We do not think that, and a disclaimer, Charles Lynch would have been my whatever uncle. But we do not think that the house that is currently there was his house. Some of it may have been incorporated into the present house, but more importantly, there is a grave up there. It's a big granite slab about the size of the conference table in front of yours, and the family thinks that that's where Charles Lynch is buried. The names, oh, excuse me, sir, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, no, I want to know where is that at?
Well, it's 2205 Concord Turnpike,
So it's right across from the
right
wastewater treatment
before you
plant.
get to Rockwell Road.
Is that pumpkin time?
There's a gentleman from Texas, I believe he's a doctor, a dentist, who owns the property, and his brother lives on the property, at least the last time that any of the family members were up there, and that was probably 5, maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
But there's a large marker up there. The wording on the marker has become obscured with age, and at the time we visited up there, we did not feel comfortable tracing the letters. You know, you can do that on old tombstones, but it's undoubtedly, we know the house was in that approximate location, and there's no other individual that would have warranted such a large tombstone, so to speak. And again, it is not part of the study, Rachel, but I think from a historical viewpoint, from a city and state and perhaps national viewpoint, you know, there needs to be some kind of an architectural or archaeological study done of the property. And I don't know how the property owner would feel about that, but I really just thought it needed to be part of the discussion.
Sure. I think I've also heard that somewhere close to here was the likely burial place of John Lynch, however, didn't know exactly where. So I think, you know, if we could just include a short section in the Historic Resources chapter about, you know, the potential for maybe studying or future study of that sort of thing for inclusion in the State and National Historic Register or something like that. I think that would be appropriate. So we could add that language.
That'd be great. And I know Doug Harvey who was previously the director of the City Museum System, and Ted Delaney, who's the current director. The last time I was up there was with the two of them. And this was, as I said, probably at least 5 years ago, and probably closer to 10 years ago. But from looking at the overheads of the pictures, and it's limited access up there. The road is normally closed. But as I said, the gentleman who owns it is out of town, but it would be interesting to see how cooperative he would want to be in any survey of the property done. He's a dentist, I believe. Doug Harvey has been the contact that we've had with this gentleman.
Okay.
So.
Well, yeah, we can definitely include something about that in the plan that, you know, that we recommend it for future research and study for potential inclusion in the historic places.
That'd be great. Well, and the way the property falls, and I can't remember how many acres it is, but it would be, you know, it's on the edge of the current plan, and it would be nice to get that property that's closer to the turnpike included in the study.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we got in Lynchburg is history. There's no question about that.
That's right.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Just as a quick tag, we spent some time talking about future land use map changes, and we talked about terms, and there were some questions. I just want to make sure that what we talked about, what we explained, is clear to everybody. The future land use map is indeed a guide. It indeed separates areas out and says this is kind of what we want to do with them, but it in no way says that's what's going to happen. And to Rachel's point, any changes that'll be made would come again before this committee and the council to be approved. And And so I want, and obviously you guys would be part of that discussion because it would be, again, a public meeting. So I just want to make sure everybody's happy with that, because I know that there's a lot of angst about and antsiness about that when you hear those kind of terms. I was when I first started. Yes, ma'am.
Right, my only comment to that is if we change from a resource conservation to neighborhood commercial, that means that opens up the door for commercialization in that area. If it remains resource conservation, then it doesn't. So correct me if I'm wrong, but if we make that change, and even though right here, right now, December 15, 2021, we say, oh, it's not gonna happen, that's not the plan. But if you make that change and you now change it to neighborhood commercialization, that means the door is open for that to happen, be it today, tomorrow, whenever that change happens. So that's my only concern when we're making a change from
I don't mean to speak.
resource
Yeah.
conservation.
I don't think you're exactly right, but I think the issue is it's more about the conversation, not about the foregone conclusion. In other words, you've said, looking down the road, in a perfect world, this might be something we would consider being the operative word. It doesn't mean we're putting out a notice that anybody who wants to build a business comes to that area and starts bidding on it. And I think there's a difference.
Well, I think we need to look at what's the current zoning of those parcels.
Yeah. Like Dave just said, let's look at the zoning. So let's look at the
And
zoning.
we're making a lot of decisions on the flume, and I'm finding it extremely frustrating. I can't pull that up. And
So I did see a message from our GIS team earlier about rebooting the server at 5:30. So I hope we don't still need Map Viewer at 5:30, because I think they might be having a problem with the external, which is Parcel Viewer. So that's what you would be accessing. So I do apologize about that, but I think they're having server issues, and that's why you can't access the zoning or Parcel Viewer in general right now.
so whatever they're currently zoned is going to designate what can and can't be done, obviously.
Right.
And that's not under discussion right now.
And so, but, I mean, I think they're, to what she is saying about, changing it from RC to neighborhood commercial, it doesn't necessarily open the door and say, come build here now, but it is another sort of, it's another, what's the word I'm looking for? It's another reason to rezone, if that comes before us. And so the zoning now is a tiny, tiny piece of B3, and then the rest is R2. So essentially, single-family homes are the only thing that can be there right now. To change the flume to neighborhood commercial would be to say, we think that's the more appropriate, more appropriate zoning for these parcels. And so, yeah.
We're planning on,
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
we're planning on places for people to live and for people to shop. Is there any plan for where people are going to work so that they can afford these houses, so that they can afford to shop? Where are they going to work?
Sure. So, that is a part of mixed use, is we see commercial and, although you might count commercial as the shop component. So also on the future land use map, which we were sort of going through, and then we started talking about these parcels in particular. Let me pull this back up bigger.
Maybe you could, do we have examples locally that you could point to that are currently used, mixed use, that might shed a little bit light on what things look like in that because I think some of the things we'd see, for example, if it was something in Windhurst, would say, well, that's not going to happen anytime soon. And so then the question of work becomes, was this still just going to be a commuter? Will people still be commuting? There's no real industrial, other than down at the lower basin.
So I do think something like a PUD, or sorry, not PUD, a TND, a traditional neighborhood development, like Windhurst or Cornerstone, that is a possibility for the south side of 460. There's a huge, open green space right now. And
We'd like it to stay an open green space.
okay. To go back to where are people going to work, we do have a designation for an employment area off of Nickerson Road. This was, I'm trying to think what page it would be in the plan.
I saw that on there. There's just houses going back to Nickerson right now, right?
Yeah, there's some houses towards the end, but it's mainly undeveloped. So right here we talk about like a smaller scale mixed use development, as well as sort of a business park here for some employment uses. So that would be the where you work.
How much does the sewer play a role in that, though? I think that's one of the things, we can't develop big pieces of land for employers without having the appropriate infrastructure. So is that something that we're looking at? Is that like, you think, a 20-year window for something like that?
So, we went back and forth a lot with Water Resources on this. They are trying to balance getting sewer to this neighborhood with a lot of others in the city. And so I think one of the things they are looking at is the cost per lot right now of extending sewer into this neighborhood. And unfortunately, because the population density is very low and because of the topography, which means you can't use gravity-fed sewer like you can in a lot of places in the city, it makes it very expensive. I want to say it's in excess of $60,000 per lot. And so it's hard. They're trying to fit this neighborhood into that list of who gets it and when. And I know they're still in the beginning stages of that master plan. So I can't say a year when it might happen. But that is something that Water Resources is trying to figure out. And of course, another thing that plays into that doesn't figure into that dollar per lot is, of course, the potential that it would bring. Because, of course, if you have more customers, it costs less per customer. So I really don't have a great answer to that, just because that master plan is still being developed.
One other question I know the gentleman on Holcomb Path Road had was the connection, and I know you had a slide that showed that connection, multimodal bridge.
Yeah, the bridge, what it looked like, yeah.
And that would be connecting, I mean, that is a totally cut-off neighborhood in many ways.
Let me find.
And I think you had a question about that bridge.
Which is going to look like where it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. You can see the traffic down the road, 90 miles an hour.
I used to ride a bike out on the road, and that was a place I used to go a lot and come down Holcomb Path and go across. And don't do it anymore. Too hard to get across there, so I know what you mean.
That's something else the police are looking to. 35 miles an hour, 45 mile an hour zone.
So there's not there's not a clover leaf or anything proposed with this. People aren't going to be, zooming off of
It's
460.
reconnecting.
It's really about connecting Holcomb Path, let me see if I can get a better visual of where it connects. Oh no, map viewer. There it is.
Well, I believe that those two roads did connect at one time. You could go straight across, so it looks like it would follow the same path.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be right here between Holcomb Path and Tyriana Road.
You can see it. They're showing it up there, right there, just past the railroad tracks.
Here.
Would you be able to exit 460 onto Holcomb Path and then go across Tyriana
You said exit 460.
onto Holcomb Path and then take that little bridge across?
It looked to me more like it was just, if you wanted to go to 460, you would go on Holcomb Path, cross 460 and go down Tyriana and then come around to the intersection. Like, it doesn't look like there's any connection with 460 associated.
Yeah, so,
Correct.
you know, that's definitely more of a design question. At this, you know, for the plan, I believe we just proposed it as a connector between those two halves of the neighborhood, without direct access onto the bridge itself from 460.
You would, like you're saying, you would have to have a way, if you're on Holcomb Path Road, you have to have a way to be able to do on 460. So it looks like you, because that's what you have right now. So you're not going to block that off. You'll still be able to get on 460. The difference is you would be able to go straight across 460 with the bridge. So you could get on 460 or you could go straight across.
Right, and I think,
That's how
right, and I
we
think
design
one of the things is this is a plan. So I think what I'm hearing and what I know from the whole idea of traffic, like, we can plan things and propose them and think about them, but, you know, the VDOT doesn't always like to do what we think they should. So I think that, you know, I think Rachel's done a really good job of, like, showing us how this stuff could work. And I think that's the goal, is how can we help make things better? And I do understand and hear, like, the issues with the septic. That's why I asked the question about the sewer, because this is one of the nagging problems that's been going on for a long time. So,
Sure.
you know, I think there's a lot of neat opportunities and potential that I see in here.
Yeah, and I think you hit a key point, Tom. 460 belongs to VDOT. Any changes we are making on or around or over 460, you know, would need to be done in close collaboration with them. And so, you know, it being adopted in the plan, it is, like you said, it's kind of, it's not necessarily the how, but the what could be. And so I think those are all questions about, you know, where exactly you would be able to move from and in between, you know, these streets. That's something that, you know, we can't really answer at this point, just due to all the design constraints and, you know, the length that you need for a turn lane coming off or onto a street or onto a road like 460. Basically, we would need a lot more conversations to figure out exactly what that would look like. And, you know, we would most likely be working with the neighborhood and VDOT should those come to fruition.
Well, since we're talking about roads, is the James River Parkway still just completely conceptual, or I couldn't tell where it was tying in on each end, or? I
Tom,
understand.
you're working on the CIP. You're working on the CIP. So the James River Parkway would connect, I wish I could show you better. It would essentially come in this way from downtown, sort of
Continues
into
Main
the
Street,
park.
right?
Yeah.
Main Street.
Yes, so the
Continues.
idea is on the downtown end, it would connect into Main Street. I think where it connects in at the Tyriana and the route is purely conceptual
Right.
at
Yes.
this time.
Yeah, but it would allow you to bypass the railroad crossing
Yes.
on Concord Turnpike, which is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's three crossings.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, we haven't, gone out to design or anything
No,
like
that's fine.
that. I mean, that's still
That's fine.
very conceptual.
I just wanted to clarify, yeah. So,
Yeah. I wish I had those old, back in the day, they would have the old books with the pictures, so you could flip through them, because it's so hard to see on here, but there's a lot of neat, I don't know if any of y'all have spent time looking at this, but there's a lot of good images of the way these concepts look. I think if you hadn't seen them, it might shed even more light on some of this plan and some of the thoughts behind it. I know sometimes people think, well, this change is bad, but I think when you look at it, a lot of it, just like, oh, well, that makes sense. And just like when we see a small commercial property, a lot of people think, well, that's going to be a Kroger. But then when you look at the lot, you realize, well, you can hardly fit a small store on it, much less, these aren't really huge parcels of land. So yeah, I think there's a lot of neat stuff in here to go through. What were you saying?
well, a few years ago, the city did a pretty extensive citizen survey, and one of the things people asked about was riverfront access. And this area was identified as the potential because you're across the railroad tracks. And was that discussed at all in here?
Yeah, so, no, we really don't discuss it in the plan, because we run into the same problem that we did with downtown, which everyone wanted us to have river access downtown. And, given the railroad, we haven't come up with the magic solution for that one. In terms of the Greenway, which essentially runs, sort of through Holcomb Path, over that bridge, up through Pleasant Valley Road. And then you'll recall I believe it was in the downtown plan, we had sort of concepts for underpasses or, some sort of multimodal features, retrofitted onto bridges. There's a potential if, there was a concept we talked about with the downtown plan of, Amherst was looking at potentially expanding their trail from their riverfront park. We were trying to sort of make this grand loop. And so possibly super long-term, if that came to fruition and we were able to make that really great recreation loop, there's a potential it could maybe be accessed from Amherst's side. But right now, we don't have anything on the Lynchburg side.
But it seems like this area is identified because there is land between the tracks and the river. I don't know how the access is, whereas downtown, there's nothing. The
yes,
tracks are on the river.
So you're right. There is a strip of land, which we don't have in downtown, but how do we get people there safely, over, under, through an active railroad is still a huge
Is that the
question.
land below Kavanaugh?
What's that?
That's the land below Kavanaugh?
Yeah, that would be
Yeah.
one place you could do it. Yeah, Kavanaugh is here.
Is that private farmland right now?
You mean this?
The island? Yeah, that area. It's like an island because there's a creek on one side too,
Yeah.
with the tracks.
Yeah, so, it's privately owned, and then I know the railroad owns some of the other slivers along here. If you've got any suggestions,
Well,
I'm open to them.
I just look at Richmond. They've solved the railroad issue with they've got crossings that are in place. They've got an incredible riverside park in spite of the railroad being right there. And so I understand, to me, the bigger issue is the ownership. If we don't own it, then we can't do anything unless the railroad is willing to do something. But now, I'm not saying our railroads are the same level of activity as the ones passing through Richmond. It could be apples and oranges, but they do have active railroads that people have to cross on foot, bike, and cars to access those downtown.
Well, that's
And Montreal, Canada has the same thing.
That's a good trail master plan discussion. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, because, yeah, there's underpasses. It's happened right here in Lynchburg with Liberty, you know?
Yeah.
Boring underpasses, and there's bridges, and,
Well, you know, if it's something we should feel strongly about, and Dave, I think you make a good point that it was something identified, you know, on that survey, and something we continue to hear about, river access. I mean, I think we could add some language about continuing to study, look at options for riverfront access. You know, if we're doing something under the bridge, on the bridge, you know, can we put in a connector there, that sort of thing. I mean, I don't see any harm including that language in the plan, just saying it is something that
I think it's important.
Lynchburg citizens desire, and although we don't know the specifics, continue to keep it in mind when we are doing any sort of projects in this area, that sort of thing.
As I recall, if my memory isn't failing me, several years back, pre-COVID era, we did have a plan that was not formalized, but a concept where there was a loop that went along the river from down by Purcell's Isle, come up, go across the bridge, come down by the market where the canoe rentals are, and come down the trail over there. There's a big loop in that. The only thing that was really lacking was the comeback underneath the bridge to complete the loop. And that was a wow, what a neat running path that would be. The only thing we really didn't have was the end underneath the bridges.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking about the recreation loop in the downtown 2040 plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, because we had talked about, you know, kind of having our hill climbs, and also, you know, putting in pedestrian or bike features on the John Lynch Bridge. The big challenge, like you said, was that the Monacan Bridge? No, Carter Glass Bridge. So yes, that is that would be a loop there. You know, however, if trails were to expand even further, you know, the Greenway could connect into that,
Yeah.
into Ariana.
And you can run a similar thing underneath the bridges down there in Monaco as well.
Yeah, you know, the good thing about John Lynch is we own that, and so it wouldn't be as challenging to get those features. But, you know, that the other bridges are something we have to work with VDOT on.
And I just bring it up there because we have looked at it before.
Yeah,
just
and
pre-COVID, and
right. And we you know, we also talk about river access at the Foundry Park in downtown 2040 plan, so there's potential for that as well.
and my wife is still, I mean, one of the things was the zip line
Zip
across
line.
the river. And my wife and I were like, okay, we want to go on the zip line.
I like the ideas, but I do want to kind of stay focused more on this. And I do, Rachel, I do think that you've addressed a lot of these questions on here. The traffic ones, of course, we can't really address. But did you have any others on your list that, like I'm seeing, I had a question about timeline, but we know that that's in a plan, you never know the timeline. So our next goal, our next step, I would assume, is we're going to want to just pass this on to City Council, where they would dig into it again and then give other, you know, even probably more people a chance to comment and weigh whether they would accept it. Is that correct?
Yep, so that is the next step in the process. You know, I've got a couple of edits about, you know, that John Lynch resting place, you know, identifying that as a thing that needs future study for historic considerations. I've got an edit about, you know, continuing to look at river access, even though, you know, we don't know exactly what that looks like now. We know that people want it. And so with those two edits,
Well, there's one more gentleman I want to hear from, and if you could, do you have a quick question?
Follows the Concord Turnpike, y'all gonna redo the road and put a bike trail in there?
So Concord Turnpike, it is it is the connection to downtown. And so, we do identify it as sort of a priority for, looking at it for complete streets. That's something that, we'd have to really dig into in terms of evaluating whether we have the amount of right-of-way and that sort of thing. I know there's quite a hill to overcome, but that's
bikers.
anywhere in Lynchburg. And so, I don't know that, the plan doesn't specifically call out, that in the implementation matrix. But, we do make a recommendation for studying what could be complete streets and what should be the priority complete streets. And so there is potential, for that connection to downtown, especially because the James River Parkway is such a, a conceptual, very long-term idea. What can we do more short-term to safely get people between downtown and this area? I know that speed is going to be a big concern there, as well as, again, just having the appropriate amount of right-of-way for those types of features.
Great. Thank you. You have one more question?
And as far as Tariana, y'all say y'all had some land in Tariana that you own?
Yes, there's a good amount of city-owned property, yes.
Yeah, is any of that up for sale?
I don't think we're actively marketing any of our city-owned
jet class.
property in Tariana. However, if someone has a serious inquiry about purchasing, property from the city, I would direct them to our Office of Economic Development. Sure.
So, Rachel, I appreciate everything. You guys have worked really, really hard on this, and I think we might be ready to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consideration of adopting the Tyrrena Pleasant Valley Neighborhood Plan as part of the city's comprehension plan 2013-2030 with the edits that you noted earlier.
Great.
I would second it.
Okay, so 2 motions. Any other comments?
Well, one motion, it's been made and seconded, it's one motion now.
She made a motion, you seconded it? Yeah, so before we vote,
Any discussion?
any discussion, any comments?
No, I'm just glad that the folks are here, and I hope you see this as really a good opportunity to be proactive and be part of this. And it's encouraging to see the city looking at this area with more interest now. And downtown gets a lot of the attention, but there's some really neat areas away from that. And I applaud the work that's going into this as well.
And I'd add, this, for those who have said they felt like the promises have been made, things haven't happened, I think this is a real effort to try to address that. I don't think those things get addressed without things like this. So, so thank you for coming. All right, we've had 2 motions. We'll go ahead and vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, passes, and it'll be going to City Council. Thank you for coming, and please be sure to attend the City Council meeting where they'll hear it again, and then want to encourage people to come, you can do that too. Thank you, and have a good day. Okay, next, we do have something here. This time, I would like to read the following statement directed to our outgoing commissioner and friend, Mark Lowe. Whereas Mark Lowe was appointed to the Lynchburg Planning Commission in August 2014, and whereas Mark has been a dedicated member of the commission and served conscientiously since that time, and whereas Mark has raised good questions and made many insightful comments over these years, whereas Mark was instrumental in preparing and adopting the Atlanta Avenue Corridor Study, the Route 221 Corridor Plan, the Downtown 2040 Master Plan, and the comprehensive rewrite of the City of Lynchburg zoning ordinance. And whereas Mark has diligently provided thoughtful insight into over 135 conditional use permits and rezoning petitions to provide for the general health, safety, and welfare of the City of Lynchburg. Now therefore be it resolved by the Lynchburg Planning Commission on this 15th day of December 2021 that they express their appreciation and respect to Mark Lowe for his service to the City of Lynchburg, the City of Lynchburg Planning Commission, and its citizens. Thank you, Mark.
So that's a resolution that you're introducing?
That is a resolution, yeah. I don't think we have to vote on it, do we? Do we? Oh, well, hopefully we'll have somebody make a motion. I don't.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Second.
Is everybody
right.
seconding?
Well, all in favor of that resolution, say aye. Aye. Nobody is opposed, I'm sure. So, thank you, Mark.
I miss you, Mark.
Speak.
Just have one question. What do I do with this great big milk crate of books that I have?
I'll take them. You want them up? I'll take the books.
Okay.
So let's see, Mr. Bowden, Bowden, Rogers, and Ms. Johnson were reappointed, right? Yep.
Yay.
They have not appointed a replacement for Mr. Lowe yet.
Okay, well, do we have another meeting coming up soon?
That'll be January 6th.
There will be.
12th? Yeah.
Will we be hearing the Concord Turnpike Development Tony West property? Will it be coming up?
Not,
Anytime
no,
soon?
we're still waiting on some staff meetings with Mr. West
Okay.
and his engineer.
Well, any other business? Anybody have an interest in leaving?
I do.
Make a motion?
I got a scoot.
Great.
I would motion.
All right, well, then we will adjourn.